Alright, so you guys know I'm not that big on really gimmicky stuff, though, you absolutely have to have one of these or the things which save you money under ideal circumstances many years down the line, and they're just an absolute must-have. This isn't really how I do things. However, there are some things that are extremely beneficial and have actual tangible benefits that a person can realize pretty much instantly, and that's what this hydraulic hose wrap does. So for those that don't know, all a hydraulic hose is essentially a braided steel tube which is wrapped in rubber, and what kills these things is the rubber degrades and then the steel starts to rust and fail. Now this is sped up quite a bit by things like abrasion or being bent at extreme angles. However, even just the weather degrades this rubber, and once the steel tubes start to rust, they become brittle and they weaken and ultimately they fail. So what we can do about that is take some of this hydraulic hose wrap, and this stuff has a lot of uses. I've not only used it on hydraulic lines, but also on like essentially battery cables, like the ones that power the winch on my trailer. This stuff is basically just a very tough, very resilient sheath which we can run these hydraulic lines through, and in doing so they're kept out of the weather and they're somewhat protected from abrasion. Now there's two kinds of this stuff. There's the good stuff and the pretty okay stuff. The good stuff, I think this AeroQuip stuff, I really like this. I think it's made in the US. However, it is very expensive. It costs like, I think about 4 times as much as this Chinese stuff, which you can tell this is not as resilient because it is possible to cut with a knife. This you can't. I mean, you just, like I said, you really can't. It takes a razor to cut this stuff, and even with that, it's something of a battle. This stuff, however, you can maul through with a sharp knife, or a razor is better. It is not as tough, however, it costs a tiny fraction as much. And typically the way I do this is if there's a real risk of abrasion, like if a hydraulic line runs across a steel surface like this, so every time the hydraulics actuate it like flexes, and anything like that I use this stuff, but for purely keeping things out of the sun, I find this stuff works really well. Basically all we have to do is get it sized, cut, melt the ends together so they're not all fraying apart like that, and I mean, it's not exactly rocket surgery, but it should extend the life of things quite a bit. And considering how cheap this is, like somewhere around 15 bucks for a whole thing of it, and each of these hydraulic hoses is probably like 20 to 50, it's pretty cheap insurance. Got these on, and you'll notice they appear to be a little bunched up, and that's because they are. I intentionally make these, well, these hoses are probably like 3.5 feet long. I probably made these 6 or 8 inches longer than they needed to be, so they'll remain bunched up like this, and they're not nearly as likely to slide down or expose the ends of the hose. If you have problems with this, what some people will do is they'll take zip ties and use that to kind of create some friction and hold these nylon lines in place. I've not actually had to do that, however, and of course I've just put these on, but on everything else that I've put these protectors on, they tend to stay in place pretty well as long as they're just a little longer than the hose that they're on. Something that I didn't mention before is this tractor actually came with at least one of these protectors. You can see that's been on there for a while. It's got all that compacted old hay on it, and that ended up here, at which point I covered the previously exposed sections with some smaller individual lines. So now this should be in much better condition and much more protected. I guess we just have to cycle this loader a couple times to purge all the air out of it. Business.